Wait. What?
Welcome to Why Believe. I am your host, Chad Ostrowski, and your guest this time is Brian Young. Yes, he was your guest last time, and he had more to say. After talking about the core reasons why he believes in the God of Christianity, relationship, grace, he thought of a couple other reasons why he believes. And then, and I'm excited for you to hear this part, I ask him a difficult question. Let's see how he answers.
I think one of the biggest things in life, and particularly in the Christian life, is relationships. So the relationship with God, but also the relationships with others. So the vertical and the horizontal, right? Mm-hmm. Your marriage, your friends and family, the people that you surround yourself with will influence you in the biggest way. So that kind of communal life too is probably one of the bigger reasons as well. And from what I've seen, it's what I've grown into. It's probably one of the most unconditional communities as well.
Your church community?
Yeah. So that's a big part of it as well.
And so that for you is not just it's not an outcome of the belief itself, an outcome of the faith. It's also a reason for the faith.
Yeah, I think it's twofold. It's an outcome of the faith, and it's also a reason.
Okay.
So,
and it's a, yeah, I guess, I mean, it's not, and faith, I think a lot of times is like this, but it's not, it's not like a logical statement. Like, because there is community, then right. I believe in this God. It's like, this feels real, this feels good, this feels like the way it's supposed to be, therefore I believe the reason for it.
Definitely.
Okay.
Yeah. I guess I'm going to throw in one more thing.
Sure.
If that's
totally
cool.
fine.
One of the big things, over this past year, the Bible started to become kind of dry to me. I would read it, and it was kind of like nothing was really happening.
And was that new, that it was dry? Yeah. Like for the first 4 years of your faith walk, was it very exciting?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. There's just beautiful, poetic, brilliant writing in these books. And full of love and grace, like I was saying. And maybe somebody that grew up in the church are like, that's kind of a cliche passage. Like, I've read that 100 times. But for me, I was like, this is an amazing perspective on how to live life. I've never read before. But like I said, over this past year, it became really challenging. I was just like, this on paper, that's not really clicking, which led me into asking some of the big questions of why I believe. And I started to read it differently and realized that the Bible's raw. And when I would have these questions, sometimes I would go to the Psalms, and Psalms are kind of a go-to for me because they're very real. They're very raw. There's David, King David, who is one of the biggest writers of the Psalms, constantly has these writings that, if are loosely translated to our lingo of like, God, are you even there? Like, what is this life? Like, all I see is crap around me, crap in me. The stuff that I'm doing is horrible. Like, the stuff that I see is horrible. Like, what? Big question mark here, God. What is going on? And I was like, man, like, I can't believe the Bible has this stuff in here. It's so wonderfully real. And that's kind of what kickstarted a new kind of season, I guess you could say, of my faith, where I could kind of reside there and identify with it and see what the psalmist, how the psalmist would respond to expressing these feelings. And oftentimes it would result in him worshiping, because I think personally, because he realized that he could ask God these big questions, that God could handle them, and that he wasn't going to say, no, like, pretend that you believe and do these things that show that you believe. God honored that he was being honest and real. Even though they're really raw, like big questions that I think a lot of, at least Christians that I know, are kind of afraid to ask. But in the Bible, people aren't afraid to ask them. And that's an amazing thing to take into consideration for the person that is approaching the Bible at all, is that there are these very raw stories, around some of, the fantastical and all that are difficult to deal with. There's a very human level to the Bible, which is really cool. That's been a big part of why I believe. So, anything else, Chad?
Yeah, I'm trying to... This is always interesting. It's always interesting to see where people go with it. It sounded to me like you've been saying what the belief is. I believe in a God who is perfectly just and perfectly graceful, and who sent his son to reconcile those two.
Yeah.
And sometimes it doesn't feel to me like the why gets answered. And I think I touched on this a little bit earlier, where I said it's at a more, it's not a logical, like, because this, then that. It's more of a, this is beautiful, and this
Right.
feels, I feel a human connection with this. And that's what keeps me believing. That's why I believe.
Yeah.
Is that how you would describe that? Or do you think there is kind of a more cause and effect type thing for your belief? Or is it more just those experiential things?
I would probably say gut reaction, probably more of the experiential in that way. Although I do think there's a reason, there's a logic to it. Although I might not be able to perfectly explain it.
Okay.
But like, I see this, I've contemplated, I've experienced, I've talked about it, and this is still lining up. So that's is that kind of answering your question?
Yeah, I guess. So it's lining up in terms of making sense of life and the world.
Right.
And
Definitely.
it makes more sense than, like, there being no God to you, or there being a God that requires working for your salvation. Okay.
Yeah. That is, that would be the T there.
Okay.
Yeah. Great. Challenging question, though. I'm sure I'm going to be thinking about it for a while. Probably for the rest of my life.